Hey, yo, what's up? Today we're talking about the definitive framework to help you get that pro sound in your music. So, in the next 10 minutes, I'll give you my tried and true repeatable framework to ensure that you can have certainty and confidence to make sure that every song you finish sounds amazing. Hey, yo, it's Alex from Meta Music. I'm a musician and certified audio engineer here to help you finish music that you're proud of, okay? Something that sounds amazing and something that expresses you at a deep level. I help music artists compose, produce, and mix their own professional sounding tracks by using a repeatable creative process. Okay. And my goal is that in every single video, you're going to get actionable advice that you can immediately implement and help you level up as a music creator. Cool. So today we're going to talk about something that's very popular in the music production space is that almighty pro sound. Okay. And so let's talk about it. I've had a lot of conversations with artists, musicians, producers, engineers around what makes a pro sound, right? And a lot of people, aspire to get there, and rightfully so. You want your music to sound amazing, to jump out of the speakers, to stand shoulder to shoulder with other tracks in the same genre or some of your favorite artists. So what's it all about? Well, in my perspective, okay, in my humble opinion, the thing that stands in the way of most people achieving that pro sound is actually misdiagnosing the problem in the first place. Okay. A lot of people think that it's mixing. A lot of people think that it's fancy production techniques or some secret mastering chain that will give you that pro sound, but that is completely not true. And so many people think this, right? If you look on YouTube, there's a ton of tutorials about how to get that pro sound with like a mixing chain or some sound design technique. And in my opinion, those things are important, but they are not as important as other things to get that pro sound. So that brings me to the first point here, which is the true hierarchy of quality in terms of getting that pro sound. Okay. And you don't want to be wasting all your energy on the bottom of this hierarchy. Okay. You want to focus at the top because you're going to be wasting a lot of energy and effort if you're only focused on the bottom, tier of this hierarchy versus at the pinnacle. So let me actually share my screen here to talk about this. Okay. And let's start at the bottom here, which is gear. Okay. And a lot of people think that gear is going to make their music sound pro, but you don't want to be wasting your money on fancy plugins and fancy gear and setting up your crazy studio and all this crazy, crazy compressors and stuff. Because guess what? Gear, tools, and gadgets are fun and they're necessary and they can help you spark inspiration and unlock new techniques. However, no amount of gear will ever make good music or make it sound good. Okay. That's completely on you because knowledge and skills will always be superior to the tool that you're using. Okay. So again, if you're thinking that you need better gear, you need better tools to make your music sound pro, that's a very big mistake, right? And you probably will never get there if you think that's the answer. So let's go to the next tier, which is processing. And again, so many people I talk to think that that's what's going to get your music sounding pro. And it's part of it, but it's by no means the most important thing by far. So again, tweaking, shaping, and refining your sounds with things such as EQs, compressors, saturators, you name it, any kind of processing technique can increase the impact of your music, but you can't solely rely on processing techniques to make your music sound pro. Okay. You can only do so much with low quality sounds, which leads us to our next tier in the hierarchy, which is now we're getting somewhere. Okay. Which is the source sound, right? The quality of the actual sounds you're working with. So again, the quality, condition, and tuning of your instruments, right? It could be your voice, a guitar, a synthesizer, whatever, right? Your miking techniques, the sound design, right? The sample selection that you're choosing will have the greatest influence on the sonic impact of your song by far. Okay. And one does not simply fix it in the mix. A lot of people think that the mix will make your music sound pro, but if you don't have already amazing sounding production, guess what? Your mix is it's not going to sound amazing. So it happens in the production and other things that are actually more important than the production, which we'll talk about. Okay, so next is performance. And again, this will vary depending on what genre of music you're making, but in general, capturing expressive, spontaneous, heartfelt musical performances are the key to creating something timeless that actually leaves an impact, right? That isn't forgettable. And just think about the countless amazing songs that are legendary that have stood the test of time, but might not have had like the best production in the world, right? And flip side to that, like, having your music sound pro and sound clean is great and all, but how many tracks have you heard? And I'd love to know, just let me know. How many tracks have you heard that sound really good? They sound clean, they sound professional, they jump out of the speakers, but they're forgettable. Like you listen to it once, you're like, cool, that sounded good, but it didn't impact you in any way. And that again just highlights that, sound quality, although it's something you want to go for, it's not necessarily the most important thing. And this is where my opinion on what a pro sound differs from a lot of people, is that what I feel is pro is something that actually stands the test of time, right? And is like impactful in terms of a production, in terms of a mix, meaning it hits people at a deep level, right? And it doesn't just sound good. And also some productions like might not benefit from a super clean sound. Like sometimes having a little bit of dirt around the edges or having imperfections actually serves the quality of the music better, right? So again, you might have to change your perspective on what pro sound means to you to actually get what would be a pro sound, which is trippy, right? And finally, the most important thing in music production by far, without a doubt, my flag in the sand, is songwriting, okay? Composition. So regardless how methodical you are in captivating performances and fine-tuning the best possible audio quality and using top-tier gear, top-tier studio, top-tier players, you name it, it's all for nothing if you're working with a terrible song arrangement or a subpar composition. Okay, it does not matter how hard you try to make it sound good. It's at best going to only sound as good as the song. Okay, so again, that is the songwriting, performance, and the sound source, right? Your source sound or sound quality is by far the best place to focus to get an actual pro sound. And I actually solved this problem with the 5th stage of my system, which we're going to walk through real quick. If you want the checklist for this stage and the whole template for this, just comment down below. Happy to share it. But essentially, the stage, I call it edit, and it comes from the wake of having an already great composition. Okay, if you don't have a great composition, I wouldn't even bother focusing on editing it or mixing it or mastering it unless you're maybe just getting started. I would work on the composition and make that the best you can, because everything else is only going to be as good as your composition. Okay, and then from there, assuming you have a great composition in the bag, now you want to focus on fine-tuning it and solving problems. Okay, so at this point, now you're kind of going down the rabbit hole of like, okay, how can we make this better? Okay, how can you make this track turn into a professional production? Okay, and again, this depends on the nature of your music. If you're working with something that might allow imperfections and that actually gives it character, you might not need to do intense editing, versus some genres of like electronic music or super advanced stuff might need super tight editing and or sound design. Okay, so the goal is to simply enhance what's already happening in the composition, in the parameters of the genre and the style you're going for. Okay, but at this point, this is like a catch-all for me in the process, where now I go down the rabbit hole of editing audio, editing MIDI for off timing, if anything's off time, if the harmony is questionable, re-recording parts, right? If I need a better source sound, right? If it wasn't properly recorded, or swapping out a patch if the synth patch doesn't match the vibe, or swapping out samples if it's not a good enough sample, and really taking the time to select the right sounds for your composition. And then you go farther into like, do we need to add layers? Do we need to orchestrate new elements? Do we need ear candy? Do we need to remove stuff to like enhance the clarity of the listening experience, etc.? So all of these questions live in this kind of stage for me. And essentially, we want to focus on solving problems instead of implementing random solutions. So what I mean by that is that if we just focus on what you could do to potentially make this composition better, you can very easily get lost in the sauce where you're just tweaking stuff, you're adding stuff, you're adding stuff, you're adding stuff, and it may or may not make your track any better, right? Actually might make it worse. However, and there's actually infinite options for that. Like there's no end to that. You can continuously add stuff forever and there's no end, versus solving problems is finite, right? There's only a finite amount of problems that you can find in your music before it will get to a point where it really sounds amazing. And I'll show you an example in just a sec here in the DAW. But essentially, that's what the stage is all about. Now we're taking the time, assuming we have a good production is, okay, we've taken care of the top rung of our hierarchy. Now we're focusing on number 2 and number 3, the performance and the sound, right? Do we need to re-record stuff, swap out samples? Do we need to get a better performance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And we're using a list to list out all the problems that we're hearing. It's like, oh, the timing on the drums and the second verse is off. The bass note that's being hit in the chorus is a little bit, shaky. Maybe we got to tweak that. I'm not even a fan of the patch for the pad synth in the bridge, right? Maybe we got to swap that out. And we're writing down all the problems so that we can solve them, right? So again, if you want to do this, I would suggest you get a timer to avoid getting lost in endless tweaks. Make a list of all the problems in your tracks and then continuously refine and revisit them until your track is finalized. Okay, and this helps you, deal with unfinished tracks. It helps you save wasted effort on subpar compositions. Don't even bother doing any of this until you have an amazing song, right? And again, it solves amateur sounding productions. So let me actually show you a quick demo. Let me grab some cans here about production that I'm actually just about ready to start mixing. So you can hear like what I mean by getting a good quality production to get that pro sound before even getting into mixing. Okay. So I'll play you this is a long progressive song. It's like 6 minutes, but I just want to show you what this already sounds like before even touching any EQs, any mixing. Okay. Is because I've taken the time to really flesh out this composition to a point where I feel like it sounds good, as well as fine tuning the sounds and swapping out samples and finding layers that work together so that it's actually sounds good already, right? And then from here in mixing, there's a few problems I'm gonna have to solve, but in general, I'm gonna be focused on enhancing the impact of what is already happening here, right? Which is a lot more fun instead of trying to make it sound good in the mix, if that makes sense. All right, so let's check it out. We'll just skip right here. I'll just skip around just so you can hear different parts, but just listen to where this track is already at before I've even started mixing, okay? All right, so we got some crazy prog jazz stuff going on, right? But sounding pretty dope. Let's go over here. All right, so we'll skip ahead to over here. Right, so I took my time to edit the drums, retake all the guitars, make sure they're played and performed tightly, right? And I swapped out some sounds. If we just go over here, right, we're in a different section, right? Finding the right synth patch.
It's here, Eddie. You gotta just go for it.
Right, so hopefully that demonstrates that like this production composition for me, like I was ready for mixing, right? And now we can fine tune it with, EQ, saturator, compressors, side chaining, parallel compression, you name it. Okay. But again, this song already sounds good, right? It already sounds complete. It sounds edited. It sounds, all the layers are working together. It has personality. It's got character, right? So again, that pro sound happens way before you get into the editing stage and the mixing stage, okay? It really happens in the composition, getting something that sounds cool, impactful, that expresses something, right? And then from there, you refine it in the editing stage, which makes it sound like 80%, 85% of the way there. Then you fine tune it with the mixing. Okay, so that's what I got for you today. Hopefully it was helpful. Again, if you want the checklist, the template, comment down below. Happy to share it. And with that said, I will see you in the